Sitting by the Fire, a podcast on ancestral wisdom, medicine, heritage, and transformation by Anna Shoyom. Hello, everyone. A very good morning or good afternoon. Thank you for being here with us today in the next episode of Sitting by the Fire. And today my guest is Ream, my colleague from Ancestral Medicine. And welcome. Thank you for being here and accepting this invitation to sit by the fire with me. And I would like to invite you to present yourself, Ream, because I know some things about you, but I prefer to know more. And I think you can tell it better.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, my name's Ream. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm here on Ohlone land, which is Oakland, California, in the United States. So much going on. My people come from Sweden, from the UK, and from central Germany. But it's been many generations that my people have been in the United States. So since the late 1800s and before that. And primarily, I work in the world as a union organizer. I've been a union organizer with immigrant workers, now with domestic workers who are home care and child care providers for the last 30 years. So I like to think of myself as somebody who's working to change the conditions of oppression in the world, facing immigrant workers in California and in the United States, many of whom are coming from Latin America, from other countries around the world where the US was engaged in imperialist wars. When I was a child growing up in Southern California in the 80s, it's that felt sense of like knowing this is wrong, knowing that in this lifetime we have work to do to change it. And so I've been lucky to have a strong purpose in the world all these years. And through the pandemic and sort of the portal or the window of the pandemic, started to turn and look at my own ancestors and wanting to call in more direct spiritual support for the work I was doing with home care workers and child care workers to fight for better wages, better benefits, more rights, more respect, to change the conditions, but also knowing that these conditions that we're in right now are much larger than this moment in time, that they were created by many forces of war and imperialism and colonization over many generations. So talking directly to my ancestors created for me a sense of support, most importantly, but also strategy and direction for my work. So that's a little bit of how I found myself speaking directly to my ancestors.
And how was it for you coming back to this living relationship with your ancestors after so many time? Have you considered before meeting with ancestral medicine, or have you found other ways of connecting with the ancestors?
I was always interested in it, even being a little kid, always interested in the history of places, in particular of buildings. When I think back on it now, it's probably because I lived in a place where, even the oldest structures, the mission system that did so much to kill so many indigenous people and extend Spanish colonialism into California, the oldest buildings are from the 1800s, right? And so I think, I always had a sense that there was something much older than the structures around me. I mean that literally and metaphorically, growing up by the ocean, surrounded by the mountains that surround Los Angeles, where I grew up. So I had a sense of that, but I didn't really find myself in any kind of direct relationship with the dead until 9/11. I was living in New York City. I was a union organizer with restaurant workers in New York City in September 11th, 2001, which now seems like such a long time ago, but just yesterday for me and in my path of my life. So I was one of the union representatives working with the restaurant workers who worked at the restaurant on top of the World Trade Center. It was called Windows on the World Restaurant. And so 72 of our union members, restaurant workers, were killed that day at the restaurant. And they came from over 27 different countries. And so as a young person, I had the great gift of attending memorial services. To be clear, there were no bodies. These were memorial services for the families, the death rituals of so many different cultures that I hadn't known or been in connection with in my life growing up Catholic in Southern California. So I had the great honor of being able to attend um, death rituals for people from Africa, from Bangladesh, from all over Latin America. And it really moved me deeply um, to be there with the families, to be someone who had known the people who, not particularly well, but had known them in life. And so the way that you sort of stand up at a funeral and you say, here's what the contribution was of this person to our lives, to life, and then be in the presence of the grieving of these lost ones, these ones that were lost in such a traumatic way. It really moved me deeply to be more interested in ritual and more interested in death, more interested in how people make their way to the other side and who supports them in getting there. And then coming out of those events, we really had to fight like hell for the surviving spouses and children and family members to be recognized by the, I don't know what to call them, the sort of aid authorities, the charitable authorities that were assisting the surviving families. There weren't really any surviving workers because many of these workers were undocumented, as many workers are in the restaurant industry and agriculture. So much of the workforce depends on undocumented labor in the United States. And so there was this fight for the living to be able to stay in this country and also calling upon their ancestors, the ones that had made it possible for them to make it to that point in life. And I thought, I want to know more about this and I want to be able to practice this. I want to be able to practice something like this because growing up, I hadn't really been taught anything about the ancestors. So I feel really, I feel really benefited in my life by my relationship to immigrant workers, both my work as a union organizer, but also inside of this practice of ancestral reconnection and reverence.
Yeah, as you were naming that, I kind of felt like a shy, like a wave of the invisible in a way, but all those connections that even when we don't recognize them stand behind us.
That's right.
And, and how important it is to acknowledge that relationship as we get closer to the death or as we actually accompanying someone to that other side, because I think we take it for granted that it will happen to anyone in living in a body, it will happen to us, but maybe it makes a difference how we allow ourselves to say goodbye, whatever the society allows us to do or not to do. And I think that's actually possibly a difference there, because grief is a very raw thing, and especially when there is no body of the deceased person to grieve at with, the recognition of the body of that person, like that final goodbye. Um, Actually, I feel my heart like shrinking in a way. Oh, like we really have, I think in the older way of understanding of life, or in the indigenous understanding of the life, that it's nice to say goodbye even to the body that carried that spirit, the deeds of that person, or that footprint or imprint that they left on the lives of the others. So
Mm-hmm.
it's where I'm going here is that the spiritual richness in the rituals that we have come from, but somehow we forgotten, sorry. And when
Mm-hmm.
you name the tragedy of 9/11, that it's a huge impact, and also in the lives who stayed alive. I think that's the
Yeah,
difficult to use.
I wouldn't have had any spiritual view of it at the time. You know, for me, I was 25 at the time. It was all about the fight for the living. I mean, of course, the tragic loss of more than 3,000 people's lives, but while there was a focus on the wealthier workers and the police and fire who died that day, there was no focus on immigrant workers and restaurant workers and service workers. In fact, there was a lot of time spent even trying to find the people who may have been making food deliveries that day. And so um,
Mm.
had this real sense of like uh, pursuing justice and pursuing justice for these families, that they be recognized in the same way as the people who worked as stockbrokers and traders. But when I think on it now and sort of the trajectory of my life and the work that we're talking about, it's like doing that work of getting those families recognized, of organizing, of fighting for their right to be in the country and to have access to the compensation funds. Like that is ancestral work, right? It's acknowledging their labor, and it's acknowledging the conditions and what led to those conditions being in place of their existence being denied. And so when I talk to my own ancestors about that, there isn't like uh, a path that they have marked out for me and I'm following it. I mean, they're delighted, they're supportive, they're completely happy to encourage me. I also think about the ancestors of my profession, union organizers, labor organizers who came before, and then of my spiritual practices. So having all of those at my back in making this life a good one, but also making this life one where we can shift conditions, individuals collectively shift conditions, right, on behalf of our ancestors. In the Buddhist community that I'm in, when you dedicate your practice after you've done sitting in meditation or however you practice, it heals in both directions, backwards and forwards, those that came before and those that came after. So I think of how we were in those events around 9/11, or how we are as the living in any mass death experience, like we're in so many right now, earthquakes, violent repression, like that's happening around my country right now, or this country right now. It's like we get to be the representatives of our ancestors, moving towards the greater good and moving away from those um, forces of destruction that have also been cultivated by some of our people individually and collectively in these many, hundreds of years coming to the United States, for example, and around the world.
Yes, absolutely. I'm just thinking about these mass events that you named and also the ongoing wars which are around us and how we forget in a way. It may sound very naive in a way, and I know that it is maybe, but the sacredness of life, I think we completely forget about that. And
Mm,
what does it take to actually be born with a mostly able body and healthy, which is not that easy. Unfortunately, it looks like it's easy, but it's not that easy. So there are tremendous blessings on our path as humans when we are born and we grow up, especially when we find a purpose, as you named so strongly that you had a purpose, helping to make this world better, to get those people recognized that lack the recognition with immigrant workers and were unseen basically by the system. And I don't know if we can work for that. I know that my petition is in a way to recognize the sacredness of life. And do you think we could create a union for that?
mm. Yeah, I mean, it's a question, right? What is a union? A union is like a mutual association of people who get together for their common good and
Yeah.
to increase the common good for their fellow workers or people who are doing what they're doing. So I imagine our ancestors would be well pleased if there was like a union of people who were calling the ancestors to us right now, the ones who are ready, willing, able, who have the capacity to support us right now. I mean, this
Yeah,
whole experience around Palestine, I think, has shown us the work that needs to be done. I think it's outside of the scope, perhaps, of our conversation to address the failure of the institutions that we thought were here to protect life. They haven't when it comes to Palestine and so many people around the world as well. So um, I know that I spend my days doing everything I can to organize for land and liberation and for to save the lives of Palestinian people. But we're dealing with, I'm curious what you have to say about this, but we're dealing with um, something that feels um, so so beyond what human institutions, not to give any, they're not off the hook, right? The institutions, state governments, they were here and must act and should have acted long ago for the Palestinian people. But just to say that, when I'm talking about Palestine or teaching or working to guide ancestral practices where we're centering land and liberation for Palestine, I've often said, like, oh, I know that my ancestors benefited from anti-Semitism, even if they weren't actors in it, as a way to, address how my people, my life, in some way has contributed to the conditions there. We could talk about the role of the US too, but just directly to say, like, my ancestors lived in parts of Germany where there were um, just major mass death experiences committed all the time on Jewish people. And so for a long time, I talked about that. Like, even if my ancestors didn't commit the acts, they benefited from them because I didn't know. And I thought, I should really consult the Oracle of Google. I should take a look and see whether what I'm saying is true from a historic or factual sense. And when I looked, the area of Germany that it's now mostly Switzerland that a large group of my ancestors come from, when I, with a simple Google search, looked, the area that they lived in was within 20 miles of where one of the largest mass killings of Jewish people happened during that time period, 800 people. And this is in the 1400s. They left about 150, 200 years later. So, here I'd been saying this thing in public. And when I looked a little bit deeper, I could see that it was real true. The way that my ancestors had been in very close proximity to something that now we're seeing on a scale in Palestine of many hundreds of thousands of people. So I think in reflecting on all of this, it's like we do have um, many, many opportunities to intervene on what's happening. Yes, through organizing. Yes, through demanding more of our institutions, but also for being in contact by being in contact directly with the ones who came before us.
absolutely. Because there are many things that we forgot. And I think this is one of the most important points of what you say, Reem. Part of my people are Jewish, so I can say that I feel what is happening in my bones. Today, as we talk today, I think is International Holocaust Day for all the victims of the Shoah, and my
Mm-hmm.
as well as my heart is bleeding for what is happening in Palestine and in Lebanon and in other parts of the world. Adding that too, because it feels really important. And in Afghanistan, where women practically cannot exist. So
Mm-hmm.
just so much pain. There was this childish um, what's the name? I forget that. My brain is operating in three languages, in Hungarian, Spanish, and English, and sometimes one language overtakes the other one. So
A nice problem to have, to be able to think in that many languages.
yes, so sometimes in our childhood we may think that one pain can actually kind of um, overlap and kill the other pain, so we don't have to deal with the previous one. But what
Mm-hmm.
in the trauma work that I'm offering as a psychosomatic therapist, that's a bullshit. That's a lie. We can't heal pain with pain. That's not how it's done. And I,
Mm.
I believe from my people and from my historical knowledge, which is of course far from perfect, that there has always been a group of people who had been who had suffered discrimination and being wanted to demolish and kill all populations. It's still happening today. Jewish people are part of them. And because of Christianity and all the religious Judeo-Christian heritage that we carry all around, that's heightened up in a way. And possibly in Europe, because the conquistadores and all the colonization in this part of the world started in Europe and this region, there is a lot of light on that particular group of people. It brings me to one point that we speak a lot these times, which is the supremacy because of who our ancestors are or aren't. And I've been walking around in this topic, and I do believe that it's a very good feeling to be proud of our ancestors. That's like, it fills us, like it gives us right for existence or being. But that's not the whole truth in many cases, because there has been people always in different lineages who have enacted wrong and did harm to other people and other lineages. So I think sometimes if we think back, survival is always something that sometimes just kick in and you cannot undone the wrong that you've been doing. It doesn't mean that that's a good thing to do, a rightful thing to do. I don't pretend to understand what's going on in the world, because I don't think it's possible to reason out with your heart. So that's where I'm at, and I'm approaching it from a more idealistic perspective. I know that, and I'm aware of that. But I also know that there is a certain amount of pain I can deal with daily. So my contribution is processing pain and supporting where I can people who are closest to us, and also giving donations and doing what I can. Because of my own ancestors, I'm not capable of going to manifestations. It's just my own nervous system is just going like, oh my God, no, don't do that. And that's also coming from my Hungarian heritage and other parts. But what I find is that there's so many ways that we can actually deal with the situations. And one of it is bringing serenity also in the rooms where it's missing, and also standing the ground of what is right and what is wrong, even between those conversations where it's someone doesn't want to speak about it. That's my way. I don't know if it's good or bad, but that's how
Well,
far.
protesting can't be the only way, right? There has to be a way for everyone in every corner in every place to stand up for life or to move towards life. So I think we focus on protesting because it's action, right? It's immediate. Um, and I think about, yeah, caregiving, providing food, all the things that make life possible.
Absolutely. But you know, we in the nervous system we have this action-based reaction. Like if it's something that threatens me, I want to do something about it. No, I want to really do something about it, unless I know that at some point my body's going to go to the freeze response where it really doesn't matter whatever happens to the body, because
Mhm.
that's the patient protection that we have on a cellular level. But how many people are already living in that dissociative state to support the systems that we're actually living in to be able to survive? And survival is always going to be the biological response that we're going to seek, because the body seeks it. So when we're already going, so to speak, all those brave and I don't know what to say about them, but all those brave people in Iran who allow themselves to be killed because they want to live differently. That's something that is, I think, would need to call all the admiration of the world, because that's like, I suspect what's going to happen, but I still trust that I can change it. And I offer the most valuable thing I have, which is my life. I don't know if I will be able to do that.
Well, a lot of people don't get the choice too, you
Yeah,
know,
that's
so
true.
to have the choice. But someone said to me recently that I think is pretty useful, that the people who are dysregulated are the ones that are actually feeling the conditions in the world right now. The people who are regulated are the ones, or the people who are just going about business as usual, are the ones that are out of touch with reality, or have a suspension of disbelief, or are working hard to actually not feel everything that's happening. So, of course, there's always something in between too, but really looking to the people, the artists, the activists, the organizers,
Exactly.
the people who have the capacity to feel what many people don't have the capacity to feel because of the conditions of their life.
Yes. I want to say something because it really is true what you say, that many people doesn't get to have the choice, that's the privilege we have, the choice. And it is a privilege and we don't realize it many times. And yeah, I think it was in the documentary. It was in many places, I know, but what comes to my mind is the Wisdom of Trauma with Dr. Gabor Mate, where he said that look at the state or how we treat our Mother Earth. Isn't that a bit polemical that we say Mother Earth and we're treating her this way, causing so many suffering to her? But it's the same that possibly all those illnesses and autoimmune issues and chronic conditions that we try to push down and heal, I came to the belief that it is all interrelated with whatever is going on in the societies and how we don't want to see what happens, how we don't want to react, and doesn't really want to say no to things that belong to our comfort, so that it could be really changed for everyone.
Well, this is that question, in the United States, the people who are really into genealogy and ancestors are people who are very interested in racial superiority, or the superiority of white people. And so we don't want to give them that terrain. We don't want them to be the ones who get to claim our ancestors, particularly our white, what we would call white in the United States, European land ancestors, people of Germany, of Ireland, of Sweden, of Norway. So I think it's really important for people who don't share those supremacist views, people who are dedicated to rooting out supremacist views, to also be in touch with ancestors, to be working with ancestors, to be talking in the public sphere about ancestors.
Yes.
And I think there's rightly been caution, when I think about being somebody who is, mostly of German ancestry, there's, a fair and right amount of caution from people who are fighting systems of supremacy, who are fighting for life, to not want to invoke when we think about just in our grandparents' time that they've been alive, how many people were killed in the name of country or killed in the name of ancestors. And so I understand why people may be very skeptical or even afraid or concerned about how these things will be used politically to harm real people. But it's not just a spiritual pursuit, it's a pursuit, as I am saying, it's a pursuit in public life to say that my ancestors, we share ancestors, no doubt, me and the President of the United States, or me and a large majority of the people who have volunteered to be immigration enforcement and are out there, now becoming death squads in our streets in the United States. Like, I share ancestors with those people. And our shared ancestors know something about what it means to live in good relationship with the earth, in good relationship with each other, right? In good relationship with the indigenous people who were here before we came. And so it's very, very important to me that we call our ancestors here, that we do public ritual, that we're talking about it, that we're combating the misuse of genealogy and ancestors, but also to say that there's not one person in the United States, an anti-immigrant person, a person who wants to deport every immigrant in this country that is a country of all immigrants, unless you're an indigenous or Native American. They don't get to claim what it means to be of European ancestry, having come to the United States, that we have as much of a claim on that experience, and that we see it differently, that we see it as training to be to become good at reparations, to become good at humility, to become good at offering our sincere wish that it be different, and bringing our lives into the stream of life, having our lives meet the stream of life all around us, that indigenous people are holding up, that nature is holding up, that babies and old people are holding up, saying that we're going to do everything we can to stop these forces of death, of discrimination, of fear, of creating this pressure system right now that is not benefiting anyone. So I feel really strongly about what we're up to as an anti-supremacist, pro-justice, pro-liberation way of practicing, both practicing in spirituality, but also practicing what is spirituality, what is prayer, but to really change the material conditions for the global majority, for people of color in the country that I live in, for all the people of the world who've been impacted, and it's probably everybody at this point, by the things that originated in Europe by a very small and elite group of people who then forced all the other Europeans to carry out that mission. I think that's why the world is in the condition it's in right now, and it's something that we've set out to change, because we have to. It's all around us.
So it's kind of like a must to reconnect to all those ancestors and lineages where we're coming from, because I think we have to do something with that, because all the
They're not
troubles
signing
that
on for this. Yeah, they haven't agreed to this.
no, but even those who are unwell, which probably a quite large amount of people, I mean, they carry a lot of grief. I know that for a fact. So until we don't hear that and we don't have the courage to feel again, whatever was suppressed in this body, through this body, which is going to put like more and more layers in the same mountain. And I truly believe that this is one of the whys, why we are at, because there has been so much cruelty all along history, and we never wanted to deal with, that it's like finally, it's like creeping on us, like, come on, like 12 o'clock, it's time that you recognize what happened. So it's really, really a necessary step. And I think in some ways, it's kind of a novelty for white people that we have ancestors as well. But we do. And we absolutely need to just get back to the line and connect with them in a way.
Well, how I got interested in all this is I was around Jewish American activists for Palestine and in racial justice movements, and they were starting to do ritual and starting to call on their ancestors in demonstrations and events that I was at. And I was like, how do I do that too? And so I'm very grateful to the Jewish organizers around me who had a sense of and a clear vision of how to call their ancestors to the struggles that we're in now. One of the organizations that I work closely with is called Jewish Voice for Peace, and they're working for Free Palestine. And they have a song that they sing that I won't sing, but the words are, my ancestors, they taught me to say never again. When I cry out for Gaza, it's because I honor them. And when I hear the words to that song, I know that that's true for my ancestors too.
I think that's true for my ancestors too.
Yeah, there is no ancestor, wise, loving, and ready to go, older ancestor of mine who um, wants to see anything like the harm, the death, the hunger, the fear that's in our world right now. They know something better than that, and they want something better than that for us. And so they hold that vision, just like the Jewish organizers who are connected to their ancestors and were asking their ancestors to come, we're holding the vision. My ancestors hold the vision too, that we can do better.
May all our ancestors hold that vision that we can do better, and maybe find ways to connect to them, even either in ancestral medicine approach, ancestral lineage healing, or other ways of prayers or connections, and connecting community and doing community rituals. I find it really nourishing, both to the earth and all the people who participate. So may we all find ways to contribute to create
Yeah,
this safe
somebody said to me, the ultimate ritual is just go out and pick up some trash. You know, the earth thanks you for
thing.
every little bit of plastic you pick up. And yeah, I think that's true too. So,
Yeah, that's true. Lately, when I go to forest walks and so on, I always forget to bring a plastic bag, but I always end up picking up things that I can pick up because it's just such a pain. But yeah, maybe make a prayer to bring the trash to the trash. That would be a good thing. Thank you, Ream, to be here with me today. Thank you for the deep conversation, and yeah, we continue to work to do the good work in the word.
thank you. I enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. See you next time.